Greetings Guardians, my name is Bife here. So the original purpose of this video was meant to be, hey, I'm gonna give you my impressions on day one after playing a few hours, and well, I've played a little bit longer than intended, but that's also because yesterday, servers were down for 3 whole hours before I could even start playing the game. So I mean, you know, that's great, but ultimately it also meant that by the time I got to this point where I was writing a video, it was 3 in the morning and well past the time when any of my uploads would actually be seen by people. So yeah, that video is here and now, 24 hours plus later. So, these are my first impressions, and as per usual with these videos, there's a good chance that the hot takes in this video are going to age like milk, but hey, that's why we're here. This is literally the first 24 hours, so let's not chase any ideas in this video too heavily, it's just a first impressions. It's the first week or so of the season, so spoiler policy on the channel is in effect. You will not see any spoilers in thumbnails, and I will give consistent spoiler warnings for things. I will be talking about the seasonal story tomorrow, but again, it's going to be the most generic thumbnail and title possible, just so that we can make sure nobody does get spoiled. Anyway, without delay, let's start with some really quick notes about the season generally. First impressions of a bunch of things. Fishing, good. Seasonal activities so far, good. Loot, particularly the taken weapons, good. Is that all narrative-based? Not really, no, but there it is. I figured I'd say it just to get it out of the way. Let's talk about the opening story mission and the mission format for this season. I think that for an opening mission to a season, this was actually relatively strong. Normally these missions feel really formulaic, almost like they're on rails. This is, well, I mean, really that feels like the formula for missions as they've been for quite a while. This time around though, we did have a lot of formatting stuff that kept things going in different directions than what we'd expected. And, you know, it was really awesome to see something like the Drifter intervening and transmatting you out up to the derelict. Yeah, surprisingly effective, because the problem with these samey missions is that, you know, it always follows this same format and structure. That was an unexpected twist and a moment that changed things up. It wasn't an A to B kind of objective flow, and that was cool. Even if it was one of those moments where you could just sit there and say effectively like, you know, this is not going to be something that changes the entire dynamic of the campaign for this season, but yeah, it was good. Really neat. He also seems like a very interesting character for this season because, surprisingly enough, surrounded by all these titans, he's really well suited to the dynamic of the new season. It's a really small thing, but I absolutely like where the Drifter is currently. The really big things in that first mission though, oh boy. Yeah, we gotta start with this. For the first time, we heard Xivu Arath. Wow, big deal. Honestly, considering the physical appearance of Xivu and the nature of her writing within the lore, the voice that was chosen and selected for Xivu was right within the bounds of where it should be, and I think that actually it was really well directed. In particular, in fact, no, let's make something new out of this. I'm gonna go ahead and say that there's a new award here on the channel. It's the "Wow, that was neat" award, for when something genuinely was pretty neat, pretty awesome. And this time, the very first mention of it goes to the moment when we had Xivu basically talking to Saint about what happened with Sagira and Osiris. Both the fact that she did it and Saint's reaction. Really powerful moment, that was neat. More importantly, it really establishes who she is as a villain. She's bloodthirsty and she really likes to twist the knife. Those are good characteristics for a strong villain, and I'm looking forward to seeing where her and Sloane go in this season, because it seems like something's happening. Okay, that's not guaranteed, I need to read the actual lore book for the season, but hey, you know, we're here in this first moment. As a first impression, I feel like that could be a really neat plot thread. Xivu appearing like this tells us that she's getting the Savathun treatment, which is exactly what's needed right now. A long introduction to an important villain that allows us to know her better. So far it's panned out great, and you know what, this was a correct and necessary path considering how important Xivu was, and I'm glad that Bungie is electing to take this path in particular. I don't expect a reveal this season, but I do think we'll be seeing more of her as the next few seasons progress. I would imagine that we will not see her physically standing in front of us this season, maybe not even until Final Shape, maybe not even until beyond then. However, I think it is important to establish Xivu in the story here and now because she is bound to be important. Also of really big story relevance in this first story mission of the season, we got a look at Deputy Commander Sloane and Asa. Let's start with our new Leviathan friend first. She's an integral part of the story for sure, as Sloane confirms that we'll be needing to understand more about the Witness through her experience. The method of doing so is once again through the use of darkness, and in particular, egregore-flavored darkness. Yes, we're looking at all that stuff again, but instead of being fungal growth, it comes from a similar kind of coral. It's weird because, I mean, coral and fungi have nothing in common, but in this instance the thing they do establish is the similar ability to link minds across vast or not so vast spaces, as this particular one happens to be. Using the coral with similar egregore-like properties, we're going to establish a closer form of contact with Arsa every week. It's an intriguing idea, and whilst it does follow the format of find the MacGuffin to do the thing, it looks as though there are chances for this format to vary up week by week. It's possible that because we're supposed to be refining this technique as weeks go on, we eventually graduate from go and find the coral to, hey, clear away these hive because they're trying to establish some kind of link to Arsa themselves, or perhaps something completely different happens each week. It's really not clear, but at the moment, I think it would be safe to say that we are looking at a very interesting possibility that the storyline genuinely evolves. Then again, it is also way too early to tell, and for all I know, yeah, we could just be finding coral every week and then listening to Sloane do her thing. Which is fine, but I think novelty is really important at this point. It's okay to have some repeated activities each week, but we should be looking to raise the bar, now especially after Lightfall. I'm fine with doing these big activities week by week, and narratively speaking, I think that's okay, but I think that we should be looking to make the story a lot less repeated and formulaic week by week. We should be looking at something every week that advances the plot, whilst also not being so repetitive. I mean, look, listen, it makes sense when you're recovering the artifacts of Nezarec, but the fact that that's where we go for things every single season, it's lost its luster. Let's be real, if we wanted to have a big wild goose chase, we want to make it feel as though it's a wild goose chase where we're looking at a whole bunch of strange stuff happening in between. I mean, look, listen, I would have loved different formatting for previous seasons. It takes time for that feedback to get through and actually make it into new content. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. Not sure, it's not clear. Right now we just need to wait and see. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Deputy Commander Sloane for a moment, because her character has finally gotten some development and story. She is now no longer the most Titan-y Titan to have ever been a Titan on Titan. And yeah, I could have tightened up the writing on that sentence, but you know what, sue me. The act of her determination to finish the mission and survive is really telling, and this appears to be her main character trait. This determination, this grit, the ability to get through. The fact that she's been given a real gambit to show how capable she is of that is also a good sign. If this was one of those things of she said, "Oh no, Xivu Arath is corrupting my mind, oh terrible," this might not have hit so hard, but seeing the actual physical take and corruption on her not only answers some really age-old lore questions of whether or not a Guardian can be taken, but also it means that we have a real ticking time bomb, and we have to sit there and weigh Sloane's ability to hold off against this corruption against the power of Xivu Arath and the will of the Witness. It's really awesome to see all of this unfold in front of us, because you know what? It's conflict that drives story like this, and Sloane is going through it all on her own. At least, she was for a long time, and internally, she may still be. It's pretty clear that lots of people will take a look at what's going on with Sloane and might not necessarily trust her immediately. They're glad to see her back, but I think it's going to take one slip for people to start questioning her real loyalties. And you know what? When she's been abandoned on a planet that was abducted by the Witness for this long and was forced to tap into the power of the enemy and effectively submit to a portion of their will, yeah, you're gonna have some questions. That's good stuff. I'm really excited to see where it goes. I'm sure she'll power through in the end for the sake of the narrative, and you know what? It'll be a really exciting time to see that happen, because that is the stuff that real stories are made of. Conflict sets a story in motion, it topples the dominoes, and you know what? If Sloane can stand strong, that's as good a narrative arc as it could get. So far, Sloane has been really good. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with her over the course of the next few weeks. With this first week 1 story out of the way, it's far too premature for judgments, but I would also go ahead and watch Commander Zavala and his interactions. Lance Reddick may be gone, but it's clear that his voice acting for this season was already complete well ahead of schedule. So at this moment in time, I think we can safely say that his story for this season is somewhat still there. Now, keeping all that in mind, I think that there is an interesting question to see whether he has some kind of faith in the Traveler, or whether he does something that keeps things in some vague kind of balance, or whether he accepts that darkness can be used. It's a really interesting moment for him as a character, narratively speaking, and I am really interested to see what happens with Sloane as a result, because I think that she is going to be the sounding board for all of his narrative decisions. I think that Zavala is going to look at what happens with Sloane and base a lot of his decisions upon what he learns. So yeah, really good so far, and I think as far as the bones of the season are concerned, the seasonal story has gotten off about as good as it could, especially on Sloane's story side and on the appearance of Xivu. But that's not the only narrative stuff that dropped during the start of this season. We also saw a lot of stuff about the Veil. There is the new questline that leads us through the Ikkala complex yet again, and yeah, there's a lot of pressure on this, and I want to leave this in a place where there is at least some nuance, but I think it's really important to acknowledge at the very beginning that there is a lot riding on this. So let's talk about it first. The Veil mission isn't a single mission, it's a weekly quest chain. Each week, as we're learning more about the Witness and its origins through Arsa, we're also learning more about the Veil through the Veil quest. And yeah, that means it's kind of a double season feature. We've got 2 seasonal story quests going on instead of just 1. And so far, with that format in mind, the approach has been what it needed to be. Bungie has been laying out the absolute basics in this first mission. The Veil was sent here by Savathun for it to be discovered by the Ishtar Collective, who did in fact find it and based a lot of their technology off of it. This was all a deliberate move by Savathun. These are the most important bits and pieces to understand. It also doubly confirms what we learned in the Root of Nightmares raid, that she stole it from Nezarec and his pyramid ship. This all happened, of course, during the battle around Earth during the collapse, and yeah, it seems pretty clear that all of that now is not just confirmed, but also it's revealing a lot of interesting moments that would have happened to Savathun and other characters in that time period. The one that comes to mind in particular is the conditional finality lore tab. It makes me want to double down even further on the idea that Savathun might have used Strand. That last bit is still speculative, of course, but you know, the fact that we know it's the Veil and the fact that we know that Savathun hid it here again, it's all very much leading to that little extra bit of confirmation. It's no perfect hint, there still isn't one, but you know, the more we learn about the Veil, the better and easier it becomes to truly put 2 and 2 together with these things. So, here's the thing though. This is all sounding pretty good so far, right? But, and here is the problem, the quest will ultimately be judged on its overall effectiveness at answering the question of what the Veil actually is. And whilst currently it is too early to judge how well that's being done across the whole quest, I think so far the format has failed that test. And the reason I say this is because I think that with how important this question was, and how relevant it was to the criticism of Lightfall, if at all possible, it should have all been dropped on day 1 of this season. Now, here's the thing. I'm sure it's really easy for me to sit here in my chair, as someone who has never touched game development in any aspect, for even a day of his life, and then to sit there and say, yeah, just drop it all at once right now. Why can't we do that? Right, guys? Right, guys? But here's the thing, right? Whether or not that's possible from the game dev perspective, from a player's perspective, these were the pressing questions. These were questions that should have been answered really expediently. It would have been better to answer these sooner rather than later, and especially so given the gravity of the narrative position for the franchise at current. This is not the time to drag out these answers, and I think that answering them all right away would have been a better move. Here's the thing though, at later dates, everyone is just going to be able to play through this quest as is. It will not matter except for dedicated Destiny fans, because anybody who does come back having played Lightfall and who returns for the Final Shape with maybe a month or a week or even a few days prior to Final Shape coming out, yeah, they'll be able to play through all of this all at once and it will probably be at the top of their list because, you know, it's a new aspect for Strand. It's the thing that they probably enjoyed most about Lightfall. They will definitely dive in for that. So yeah, good news on that front. But for the moment, the slow delivery of it, I don't think that's the right move. Yes, the people who are playing it right now are the bolted-on Destiny fans, and they will be around for it no matter what, but it still just leaves a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. These answers, from the community's perspective, should have been a priority and they're long overdue, and again, any game dev watching this will know whether that's actually reasonable or feasible or not. It's also a question of what the time frame for the creation of this quest was. If this was something that was made deliberately, then yeah, maybe it's fine that it was like this and you could have potentially pushed it out in a more rapid fashion. But if it was one of those things that was created in response to some of the key answers that were missing in Lightfall, and it really was something that had to be scrapped together, then yeah, I really feel as though we're going to be in this place where releasing it this quickly and all at once wasn't necessarily possible. And again, it's impossible to know which of those scenarios it was, but that's why I'm not really saying anything more than this. It would have been good to get it all at once. I understand the reasons why it may have been, but also, I just really do feel like if all of this was delivered in one fell swoop, it would have been a lot better. I also don't think that the game devs over at Bungie really need to be told this anymore, because you know what? We made our voices pretty clear when it came to Lightfall. Yeah, opinions on this quest, the Veil, the quest of Lightfall's campaign, yeah, all of that has been pretty well received. They have heard it. You can guarantee they have. They're not sitting blindly and idly at their desks. They know what's going on. So, yeah, just understand that there's only a certain degree to which they can actually react to any of that feedback. I have high hopes for the quest, but it does worry me that people will miss it as interest declines over the season as well. I think that as long as the seasonal story is good and sees interest, this will too. But that is still a coin flip. And much as lore junkies like myself might be enthusiastic, there's no guarantee that the rest of the player base remains so. Lore-wise, I think it's fair to say that we've got some interesting stories to tell. The new planet armor talks about Sloane's adventures on Titan, there's new lore on the Taken weapons, which talks about various characters. Read the hand cannon one from the perspective of Osiris and Saint 14 to see Osiris absolutely bodying Brother Vance. It's fantastic. There's also some interesting notes on Sloane and how she's fighting off her corruption in the lore book of the seasonal story. All of the story stuff aside, the lore stuff looks promising. I haven't gotten enough into it because there's a whole bunch to read and it's literally day one. But what I will say is that I think things are looking okay from this moment in time as far as the core lore is concerned. We still haven't seen the dungeon that's meant to be releasing in a few days, which is bound to have a ton of lore and other interesting implications, but for the moment things are in a place for this to be an okay season. It's started narratively about as well as it can, but for Bungie in this moment, all of the narrative points from here on out need to be a consistent return to form. I think it's fair to say that Lightfall shook the foundations of player confidence. This needs to be the moment where Bungie starts rolling out their big guns. Titan Sea Monster teaching us about the Witness and its origins is about as good a start as you can have as far as a proposition of story goes, but the momentum needs to be there too. No mistakes, no slip-ups. It's a rough time, but there is a path there, I believe. A path that leads to Final Shape being good. As long as all of this is a run-up between Lightfall and the Final Shape, a single seamless story progression from one season to the other that brings us interesting story beats, good characters, good characterization and writing, and actually gives you the ability to sit there and say that the story isn't mundane, yeah, then the narrative is in a good state. That's not guaranteed. Bungie needs to bring their A-game from here on out. It is no longer good enough to have 1 or 2 slacking seasons in the year. Everything needs to hit that beat. In a certain sense, Witch Queen, Season of the Chosen, Season of the Lost, even Season of the Splicer and some of the other seasons from previous years, Season of the Seraph, all of these raised the bar, and to Bungie's credit, because you know what? They were great, they were excellent. Lightfall underperformed for that bar and it made some pretty big mistakes. And so now Bungie needs to show us yet again that they are able to deliver. I'm always an optimist and I'm always a believer that Bungie can turn it around. After all, I've been covering this game for 9 years and I've seen them do it a few times, but what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments section. What are your thoughts on day 1 of Season of the Deep? Personally, I see a path forward. I am cautiously optimistic, but I don't know if we're quite there in a place where we can judge where this will be. What are your first impressions? Let me know. Of course, you can also keep up to date with Destiny lore and the Season of the Deep by hitting subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. Also, if you want more lore videos from Season of the Deep and Destiny 2, go ahead and hit the like button. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.